to.
Okay.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the Corporate Roundtable podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Hanna, chairman of the Corporate Roundtable. We're so delighted to have LaKeitha Anderson on our program today. LaKeitha has been an amazing leader for many years with the National Black Hawk State Legislators, and she just made a transition. I'm going to let her share that with you, but LaKeitha serves as our vice chair of the Corporate Roundtable, as a member of our executive committee. And I am a big fan of LaKeitha's. I can't tell you how much she means to the organization, but just love her energy. So LaKeitha, welcome to the Corporate Roundtable podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great, Patrick. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful, bright Sunday morning, and this is perfect. It's not too early, so I was able to, get up a little late, listen to a little church, and then now I'm here.
Right.
So this is
right.
So thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, of course, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. And, Sunday's a nice day to do it. You're getting ready for your week. And so we know how busy everyone is, and making the time to do this for our members and also for our legislators is very important. So but we'd like to keep this conversation off, just kind of getting to know our members more. So tell us a little bit about, we know who LaKeitha Anderson is today, but tell us who you were before you became you.
Before I became me, it's a great question. I was the little Black girl from Dallas, Texas, right? From Oak Cliff, Texas. Carter High School, class of 91. I was a cheerleader. I played sports, and I come from a very large family on both my mother and my father's side, and large families that showed nothing but love. I don't have a story of, I came from, dismal, beginnings. My parents worked hard. My parents are baby boomers, and we know what the baby boomers did. They were that first sort of line of individuals who, afforded us, people like me and you, to go to different types of schools, even though I went to an all-Black school, which is why, it's funny. I didn't go to an HBCU. I went to the University of North Texas. I didn't go to an HBCU, but I went to all-Black schools from kindergarten to high school. And so even though I can't claim the HBCU experience, but my foundation was rooted in my community. I went to neighborhood schools, and as I tell somebody, I live a very, very Black life, and have always been prideful of that. But I was this little kid. My family talks about how I was always adventurous, always into something, always running off. My dad early on made sure I was involved in sports. I remember one time asking my father, I wanted to be a cheerleader, and his deal was, in order for me to be a cheerleader, I still had to play sports. It wasn't, I could play sports without being a cheerleader, but to be a cheerleader, I had to play sports. So I ran track.
You wanted to get out of it, right?
Oh, he was like, listen, you can do this, but you have to do this too. So I was a very busy child. And I ran summer track, I ran track in high school, but then just grew up in a very close-knit community. Oak Cliff is, I wouldn't have changed anything of my upbringing. And that allowed me to go to college and still have that sort of precocious little inquisitive child. I was still that person, even in college. Pledged Delta there amongst 17 other, beautiful women who were all leaders. We were all leaders in the school, but I always just ran with the crowd that were individuals and leaders at the same time. So we followed the rules, but we also did things on our own. And so, which brought me to Washington, and thought, okay, I've had enough of that. I've done enough here. Even there, it's funny, we're talking about Nbcsl, because I got my start in politics working for both Senator West and State Representative Helen Gaines from Texas. So, and thought, okay, this is cool. I sought my sights on other things, right? And I moved to DC thinking, okay, I've done politics on the local and state level. Let me see what this federal thing, let me see what DC offers, and moved here. And even here, I was able to surround myself with some great friends, the great crew and crowd that follows the rules, but also do things their own way, which naturally I, was, drawn to that crew because that's just how I roll. And got into corporate and for 12 years lobbied for RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company. Very fulfilling but hard job. Being a Black Democrat woman, in tobacco. And those who know me know I never shied away from that. I carry tobacco proudly, because I'm not going to do something and be ashamed about it, but it wasn't about smoking. It was more about regulation and taxes, corporate issues. So that's my foundation. That's what brings me here to where I am now. I'm a senior policy advisor with Brownstein.
Talk about the little transition. How was that transition for you?
The transition was interesting. And because we're family, and this is family, I was tired. I think I said this the other day on the call. I was tired of being that corporate face for very contentious client, for a very, very contentious industry, which it was fine. And I guess I made it look easy because some people try to get in like, well, you may look so easy. Well, I didn't let that rule me, but it was difficult. And at some point, I was over the neglect of me as a person. At some point you become a corporate figure with the dollar signs behind you, and people only want you to be invested in what they're doing, not invested in you.
Right.
So yeah, but but again, tobacco taught me a lot.
Right. Well, you've done so well, and thanks for telling the story about your family. And anyone that knows you knows that family is very important to you. In our conversations that we've had privately, you always talk about your family, and it's what I love about these conversations. We get a chance to connect with the human being, not just a corporate leader. So thanks for sharing that, and congratulations on your transition. We're so excited that you were able to hit the ground running and come into a new firm and join the corporate roundtable in short order. So that's an amazing record, and it really only LaKeitha Anderson can do that. One of the things that President Mitchell and he is doing an incredible job leading the organization as president. Billy Mitchell from the state of Georgia is our new president for Nbcsl. He's asked me to really sort of lean in to get feedback from our member companies. On the corporate roundtable has over 105 member companies now, and there's so many different issues that each company is facing. Are there any public policy issues that you've got a different portfolio now? You've got multiple clients versus one industry cluster, and so it may be difficult to shine a light on one particular issue. But is there anything that, from a public policy standpoint, that you'd like to shine a light on today, LaKeitha?
So it's interesting you say that. I'm just sitting here thinking I do have a lot of clients, and before I was only working for one, right? Which is one reason why I wanted to leave. I wanted to get the experience with other industries. And across the board, I've been talking and speaking to my clients about taxes, regulation, and healthcare have been the consistent messaging. And me being me, I throw in equity always. And telling companies, okay, you can ask for this, but we are entering into, and I call this, people laugh, I call it Black Wonderland. And when I mean Black Wonderland, I mean Black people, but I mean people of color too, because it's a reckoning right now. And I think companies and members of Congress see it. I mean, for people who can say, everybody, no, it's been here, but now the world is seeing it. The world watched George Floyd get murdered by a white cop, right?
And
we watched it
and brought up
in daylight. And so no one can anymore say, well, I didn't know. In my previous company, I was co-chair of the ERG. And for those who don't know, is the Employee Resources Group.
Resource group.
Yeah, I was co-chair, of course, of the African American one, but I was also a member of the women's, right? And each one talks about their own disparities, right? And so now I just think corporate America and the country period, the world is paying attention. You know, you look at Facebook and you look at the news, everybody's being called out. You can no longer get away with stuff, right?
You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things I took away from our Corporate Roundtable quarterly call, just how much energy was in the room to want to have that conversation about what can we do as a corporate roundtable to help our legislators to shine a light on some of these equity issues, because they're across the board. It's not just one or two examples, but it's across the board. And good for you for connecting the intersectionality between taxes and measures that are often seen as, well, these are business issues when you talk about tax reform. But at the end of the day, it's really about creating jobs for our community. And we need to have a level playing field to help create jobs. And if you can connect that story and a narrative
and healthcare too.
Why it matters.
Healthcare is big. When coronavirus first hit, we were having all these discussions. And this is going to be the first time I've ever said this. I had coronavirus, and you know this, right?
I didn't know that.
Last year, I was early. I was during the time where on the news, all you saw were people on a ventilator, and you just knew, okay, once they're on the ventilator, they're not coming back off. And I live alone. So it was kind of interesting how I soldiered through that. But I think it's because I am traditionally a very healthy person. I'm a runner. I ski. I golf. I do it all. I'm a very active person. I think that contributed to it not having much of an effect on me. But when we're talking about so many of our people, so many people of color who were dying from it, companies cannot ignore that. You cannot ignore that. And even with a tobacco company, I kept screaming it about, listen, whatever we're doing, whatever we're asking about, we need to ensure we have a part of this conversation. And so I think that's also contributing to the flip, the switch, the change of mind, the change of momentum. When I talk to my clients, I say to them, okay, well, let's tell your story. Tell the story. And your story should include how coronavirus has affected your workforce, your consumers. If you're going to go talk to a member for some money for whatever, appropriations, PPE, whatever it is, you better have a good story on how you utilize it and what you've been doing outside of hiring 15 more Black people or 17 more Hispanic people.
Because it's so much bigger than that. You're absolutely right.
It's so much bigger than that. What's the down effect of it, right? You're asking you, and then members of Congress too. I mean, they've setting up whole subcommittees on diversity, and we say diversity, and I wish that, that's the buzzword now, but it's so much more about equity, people having a fair chance. People started at the same place. Secretary Marcia Fudge, Secretary of HUD, who I am a huge fan. First, because she's the former president of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and I am a member. But she was always one of my members that I could go to. And once she was going through this process, I said, well, hey, do you want HUD? Because HUD always goes to the Black people, right? And so, and it's me being a political, I know that. And I'm like, do you want HUD? Do you really want this? Because I'm going to help you. But do you? And she said to me, whatever I get, I'm going to help my people. Point blank.
Right.
And so I think people need to realize that's going to be the trajectory, as you asked me that question of how things get done. It's like, what are you doing for others, right? For your workforce. So it all comes back full circle. right? And our quarterly meeting we had the other day, I thought was probably one of the best we've had in a long time, Patrick, because we brought up things, because we are the people in the room, in both rooms, right? In the room with each other and in the room with our companies to fight for the dollars, to fight for our memberships with NBCSL and Congressional Black Caucus and Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Without our faces, there will be no discussion. So
that's true.
To be able to talk about that in a room full of people that you know, I can tell you, we haven't had a chance to talk about this. I got so many chat messages to me from people just like, thank you for saying this, because they want to say it, but you know right. Me, I'm going to usually say what everybody's thinking.
That's why we love you, LaKeitha, because you're going to keep us straight, keep us focused, and you're going to be honest, and that's what we need. That's why you're on the executive committee, because we need that kind of leadership. But I'm thrilled to hear that feedback. It warms my heart that everyone saw value in it, and we want to keep getting better for our members. Let's turn the conversation to NBCSL in our few minutes left. In particular, I really love the organization. It's been so rewarding for me being able to represent my company, but also getting a chance to collaborate with people that look like me across the board. And so talk a little bit about, why NBCSL matters to you, and what do you like about being on the corporate roundtable? Those two questions for our members and for our legislators today.
So for a few reasons, my predecessor long ago was Ben Ruffin. And the corporate roundtable luncheon is named after Ben Ruffin, because he played such an important part of establishing NBCSL and establishing the CRT. But my adoration goes back too, because again, as I talked about my beginning in the state, I worked for two Black members. I worked for State Senator West and State Representative Helen Giddings, and they were involved in NBCSL. So I knew about NBCSL like in the early 90s, right? Preparing her briefing books for that, and never getting a chance to go because it was different then.
LaKeitha, you're gonna tell people our age. You keep saying the early 90s.
I know,
you better
right?
Stop that. You better stop.
But I appreciated just those Black lawmakers being at the table and fighting for the things I just talked about. Coming on to Reynolds, I knew how important Ben Ruffin was to NBCSL. And I knew that no one assigned the job to me, but I knew that I had a job to do to continue to uplift his legacy and the company's legacy with NBCSL, but to give it a different meaning, because it had been dormant for a while, because there was no one that looked like me there. But I've always appreciated going to NBCSL because it really is a family reunion, and people don't understand that these things are professional organizations, but for us, it's a family reunion. I don't care if I don't see you during the year. That once a year in December,
right?
We get a lot in those few days with people that we truly enjoy being around.
Sure. Right.
It doesn't even feel like work. It is, but it doesn't feel like work. And so you feel comfortable there. You feel home there. You feel rejuvenated there. So that's what I appreciate about NBCSL. But then we're also discussing very important topics of the day in those rooms and how they, but it's always how they affect us. Because most of the members of NBCSL represent largely African-American districts or minority districts. And so it's always the same discussion, no matter you're from Connecticut or Mississippi. Right? It's still about equity. It's still about appropriations. It's still about healthcare. We do diabetes presentations from different pharma companies, high blood pressure. Those are things that really, really affect our families more than anybody else, right? And so we have a great touch point to those companies, both professionally and personally. So I've always had a love for it.
No, that's well said. And hearing the story, and the people that are so influential in your life to continue that respect for them, and you stand on their shoulders. Of course, we all know Ben. I live in North Carolina. Ben was one of my mentors and fraternity brother, and he was one of those first leaders who was strong on civil rights and equity, but was able to connect that intersectionality between business and social justice and civil rights. I mean, so we're not monolithic, that we can do both. And I really, I think about Ben all the time, and having a chance to share this term, it's been truly a blessing and an honor. LaKeitha, we've talked about a lot. I think NBCSL and President Mitchell is working hard to create that family atmosphere in December. So keep your fingers crossed. I'm optimistic that we will have a chance to reconvene in December in Atlanta. So for those that are watching this, please plan to join us for the annual legislative conference in Atlanta. What's your 2021 outlook? You know, vaccinations are coming out. Before we close, talk a little bit about how do you see this playing out as far as the new normal? You know, we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show related to what the new normal is with the Zoom calls we're on. Do you see business going back to business as usual and us crisscrossing the country in the next year, or is that going to take some time? But in general, any 2021 outlook that you care to share with the audience today?
If we go back to the way things were, shame on us. Shame on us. That means that we haven't learned. There's been a lot of suffering and a lot of enlightenment. And if we don't take those learnings and those lessons to the next phase of this, then shame on us. I myself have appreciated, I've been, listen, everyone knows what, before this thing happened, I was like the road runner. I was on flights and in cities all the time. But this has given me a chance to slow down. Slow down. And I appreciate my house more. I appreciate my neighborhood more. I appreciate my family more. I don't know how much more I could have because, I love them to death, but I appreciate them more because I haven't been able to see them. My dad suffered a stroke a couple of months ago, but because we are able to work remotely and you have your laptop, I was able to go to Dallas for a month and a half to take care of my father. Think about how that would look normally, right? So we've lost some people, especially most recently during this time, and things look different on how you remember them and how you can memorialize them. So if we go back to the way things were, shame on us. Shame on us.
Excellent.
But I do think that in spite of all of that, there was a reckoning. The insurgent, or whatever you want to call it, insurrection, I don't know what word they're using, that happened on January 6th, opened up the eyes of everyone to see some of this ain't about rich or poor, it's about Black and white. And so let's figure that out. The covers have been pulled off on a lot of things that we've accepted or that were just the way they are. They're no more. They're no more.
Right. Well said. You can't hide from it. And we all have to work together in order to bring our communities the hope and prosperity that we deserve. And NBCSL is a shining example of how we can make change when we work together as a community. LaKeitha Anderson, Vice Chair of the Executive Committee for the Corporate Roundtable. Thank you so much for making the time to come and talk with us today. We're so excited, and we just want you to know how much we appreciate you. You're so inspirational to us all. Keep doing what you're doing, and NBCSL and the Corporate Roundtable will be here to support you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. This is great. This is great.
Thank you.
Okay.